Canon
Makeup.
ready to shoot.
Makeup.
Today's about makeup, actually, believe it or not. Makeup. We're gonna have some makeup here. Good morning. Thank you for coming. I do appreciate it.
Viber. No. Viber.
We're going to start before we get to page 198. We'll make reference to Hanukkah. We'll get back to Hanukkah, a little bit of Hanukkah, and the Hanukkah spirit, right? Memphis, we knew when the supermarkets are putting out matzah, we know Hanukkah's coming. So now, or Rosh Hashanah. We light on day one candle, and on day two candles. That is the opinion of Hillel. Hillel, who lived 2,030 years ago, notes that that's the appropriate way to publicize the miracle. 1 for day 1, 2 for day 2. There was a different school, that was the school of Shammai, and Shammai tells us that's not the way to do it. On day 1, have 8. On day 2, 7. Pochet ve'olech. That's how Shammai said to do it. We follow Hillel. But there was this school of Shammai. The Talmud wonders, what is the logic behind each one of their opinions? Why does Hillel like the idea of increasing 1, 2, 3? Why does Shammai go with the reduction of 8, 7, 6? So Hillel believed that there's a concept of ma'alim ba'kodesh, that, for example, if you have a mantle, a cover that was used for one of the works of the prophets, right? You had a book of Yeshayahu that was used for haftorahs. It had a mantle, it had a cover. You want to upgrade it and start using it for a Sefer Torah, that's fine, because you are upgrading in sanctity. Upgrading in sanctity is good. That's so much of our religion is trying to improve, that I should be better than yesterday. On the other hand, you are not allowed to do vice versa. If I have a mantle, a cover for my Sefer Torah, and for whatever reason I decide that I want to transfer it to the work of the prophets, which have less of a sanctity, I cannot do that. Ein moridim b'kodesh. So due to the fact that there's a concept of growth, notes Hillel, light 1 candle on day 1, 2 on day 2. That's Hillel. Shammai has a different view of the matter. He notes that there is actually a source for the concept of reduction, for going down from 8 candles on day 1 to 7 on day 2 to 6 on day 3. Where do you find in our tradition this concept of a reduction, a concept of doing a lot on day 1 and less on the following day?
Succos?
Bingo! Succos. Comes Shammai, very good, and he notes that we know that on day 1 of Succos, you would offer 13 young bulls in the Beit HaMikdash as a korban, 13 of them, and on day 2, it's down to 12, and then down to 11, until you reach 7 on day 7. So Shammai says to us, if you do it on Succos, do it on Hanukkah as well.
Sphera, yeah, makes sense.
What?
Spheres.
Yeah. True. But we do find, once the concept does exist, Shammai feels comfortable. Now what we have to ask, is there any relationship between Succos and Hanukkah at all? Is Hanukkah supposed to correspond to Succos? Obviously, if Shammai believes that the candles should follow the paradigm, the structure of Sukkot, so obviously there is a relationship. So the question I'm going to leave you with for now is, what is the shaychut, what's the relationship between the Hanukkah candles or the Hanukkah message and the message of Sukkot? So we'll stay with that question, and then we could go ahead and turn to page 198. Now what's happening is, remember, Yaakov returns to the land of Israel from an area that's in modern-day Syria. Now I will start making sense. The core. I'm started the core. What?
He started already. Is that what he was telling you?
Thank God not. He was apologizing with the core, but just the season to ignore the core.
Really hit the spot, I see.
Now I'll start making sense.
Should have drawn a menorah.
Now,
Gary, you should have drawn a menorah on it.
yeah, we should really demand a menorah. What is this, Quebec or something? Now, you want a chumash? Here's the chumash. You mean coffee? At least I can do it. Yaakov Avinu spends a very long period of time, 20 years, up by his father-in-law, right? Something that's difficult for some to imagine. 20 years working there. This was hard work, right? This is not today type of work where we, work for 10, 15 minutes and go for a coffee break. This is in the field. This is real work. He makes his way back finally to the land of Israel. And he settles somewhere. He purchases land in northern Israel, in an area near Shechem. He purchases land. He pays for it. It's his land. We read about it last week's Parsha. He settles there to an extent that his cattle, his flock, is there. He owns not just property in Israel, but rather he actually has animals and shepherds that are grazing up there near Shechem. Eventually, at some point, he makes his way to southern Israel, to Hebron. His father's there. No youngster, right? He returns. His father is in his 160s. He's 120, right? He's a very, very old man, his father. And he stays in the Hebron area, taking care of his father. He owns property in northern Israel. Has flock in northern Israel. Now, so the Torah tells us, Vayeishev Yaakov. You should know he settles. Where is he settling? Be'eretz megurei aviv, in the land where his father sojourned. Be'eretz Canaan. So on the simplest level, he's settling in an area where his father lives. His father is alive. Yes, we were told last week that his father passed away, but in reality, his father did not die until after the sale of Yosef. That happens later. The father mourns. Yitzchak mourns the fact that his son is going through such difficulty that his beloved son, Yosef, is gone. So what's happening with Yaakov? He has the son Yosef, and Yosef is beloved by his father. And in verse 3 we are told he was a ben skunim, the ben skunim. And the Targum tells us, the Unglas tells us that this ben sekunim is not just the son born at an old age to his father, right? But rather it's a son of wisdom. He teaches him what he knows. He relates to him. There's a very, very strong relationship between Yaakov and Yosef. And the father purchases for him or makes for him this tunic that's woolen, indicating that the father sees in him something, that there's potential there, there's leadership there. And he has dreams. Are they prophetic dreams? Are they dreams that just indicate that this is a person that is thinking about it throughout the day? Right? Judaism believes that dreams are really a blend of the two. There's a level of prophecy in dreams, but there's a level of narishkeit due to the fact that you're thinking about something, right? You watch a specific TV program, that will affect your dreams at night. There is always a level of prophecy. It's probably nullified, and it's very hard to really figure it out. But in those days, there was prophecy there as well. So Yosef is having dreams of leadership. The stocks bowing to him, the celestial bodies bowing to him. He's either thinking about it day or night, or indeed designated. So the brothers are agitated. The brothers develop hatred towards him. The father tries to cool things down by rebuking Yosef and saying, what are you drawing up? What are you thinking of? You think we're going to come bow to you? So there's a tremendous amount of stress, dysfunctional at this point, hatred. Now, the section ends on page 200, the last verse on page 200, which is verse 11 of chapter 37. It ends off, Vaikanu boechav, the brothers are jealous. There's hatred, there's jealousy. They see this one believing that he is chosen, that he is the chosen one. They don't deal with it well. How does the father deal with this all? After rebuking him, deep down, he is aviv, the last three words, shamar et hadavar. He kept the matter in mind. He preserved it, meaning he did not ignore these visions. He indeed, Yaakov indeed saw in Yosef the future. He saw in him a leader, that he's going to achieve something. He's going to achieve something that will unite the people of Israel. Perhaps they will enter into an era where they could fulfill their mission, what we call a messianic era, when we reach out to humanity, that we will not just be doing for ourselves, but for the world, a time of peace. When there is Jewish peace, the goal of Jewish peace is for the sake of the world. The Father sees in him that authority, the one that has the ability to get us there. The Father is waiting. But the reality is there's jealousy and hatred. And then we go ahead and turn the page, and the brothers are in northern Israel. Why do the brothers go to Shechem? Vayilchu Echav. Now, his brothers went to pasture the father's flock in Shechem. Because remember, the father is down there taking care of his father. That's, happens at times. You take care of a father, and there's a business to run, right? Life continues. You have to take care of the flock. So the children go up to Shechem. Now, Yosef stays with his father. He spends a lot of time with him. He studies with him. And I personally would feel comfortable with Yaakov keeping Yosef close to him, away from the brothers, because he is mindful of the difficult relationship they have. But that doesn't happen in verse 13. Vayomer Yisrael. Now suddenly it's Israel. Like the name that indicates a higher spiritual level. He turns to his son and says, Achicha, your brothers, they're pasturing in Shechem. So go there. Lech nareh. In verse 14, please, Yosef, go look into the welfare of your brothers. And in Hebrew, shlom achicha, their welfare, their shlom achicha. Vet shlom hatzon, the welfare, shalom of the tzon, of the flock. And then go ahead and inform me. He wants his son to make his way to Shechem for shalom. For the shalom, for peace. Well, what kind of peace? We just read a whole 12, 13 verses where there's hatred, where there's jealousy. The father's aware of it. Now that suddenly they're in Shechem, Yaakov wakes up and says, you know what? Go there for their welfare, for shalom. It just doesn't make sense. And the rest is well-known history, that they go, there's hatred, he's sold, he makes it down to Egypt. The father never recovers from this loss for a 22-year period. You can imagine what he was going through. But there's difficulty with this great shalom vision that he has. Yeah, go to Shechem. Shechem will bring peace. Like a homeland. What's going on? What does Yaakov really want with it? Something must be either wrong, or there must be a very profound agenda here. So we'll take the second approach. Now let's go back to when they settle in Shechem. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to page 178. When page 178 last week, Yaakov is terrified from this pending attack by his brother with 400 warriors. And a miracle takes place. There's a shift that Esav, representing the nations of the world, the symbolic anti-Semite who hates Yaakov, hates him, full of hatred. Suddenly he gives him a hug and a kiss, wishes him well, offers some gifts. The world accepting us, the world accepting our right to the land of Israel. That's what's happening here. That's messianic. That's the Yemot HaMashiach. When the world really, when the United Nations will no longer be focusing on Israel, when John Kerry will no longer be running around claiming to ignore Israel, and let's focus on our wonderful working relationship with the Iranians, something will happen, we believe. And that, Yaakov believes, is happening that moment. When in verse 16, Esav starts his journey back to Seir, leaves. Yaakov, here is Israel. Right? We have those brief moments in 1947 in November, 1947, or in San Remo in 1920, when the world does say, here's Israel. But those are brief moments that the minute after they offer it, they say, wait a second, let's try to get back as much as we can. What were we thinking? Right? That's the United Nations in essence. Yeah, here's Israel, but Zionism is really an apartheid state, and Zionism is racism. That's the whole essence of that structure, that building in Manhattan. Right? Messianic era, when we see those few moments, and that's what's taking place right now. So where does Yaakov go? Where does he go in that Messianic era? Yaakov nasa Sukkota. He goes to a place called Sukkot. He builds there a house for his flock. He makes these Sukkot. Sukkot. What does Sukkot have to do with it? In other words, Messianic era, Yaakov makes his way to Sukkot. If you tune in to the Haftorah, to the portion we read from the prophets, on day 1 of Sukkot, it is a portion that talks about the nations of the world coming to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkos. Sukkot is not just a Jewish holiday. It is a holiday that is really for humanity. There is going to be in the future a time when we will expect, and the Almighty will demand, the nations of the world to come to Jerusalem to show their appreciation. It's going to be the Thanksgiving, the real Thanksgiving, right? Not with the turkey, but with the journey to Yerushalayim. Sukkot belongs to the world. And we, by the way, are concerned about the welfare of the world. Come Sukkot, when we go ahead and offer those bulls, if you would add up the number of bulls that were offered, 13 day 1, 12 day 2, 11 day 3, if you add them up, you will get 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12 plus 13, which equals 70, corresponding to the 70 nations of the world. Sukkot is a holiday when we relate to the world, when we interact with the world. And you know how we interact with the world? We present our religion. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We're no longer in the ghetto. We are no longer living with a wall around us, but rather we are secure enough to remove the wall and say, you know what, world? We're going to deal with you. You know what, world? We're going to share what our culture is about and what faith is about. Sometimes we're afraid to do it because we believe that if we're going to get out and interact with the world, you know what's going to happen? What Jewish Christian dialogue? What's your attitude towards it? Right? Go ask any rabbi. You're going to see him getting a little bit uncomfortable. Right? There are those that believe that it's totally prohibited. Right? Because God forbid, dialogue means that you're going to be listening to a philosophy that's different than yours. It might affect you. If you walk in with fear, dialogue could be very harmful indeed. But if you know exactly who you are, and you are there, you are interacting with a person, because you know that what you have to offer is good for everyone. If I know that the values of Judaism, of appreciating what the world's about, appreciating the fact that there's a higher being, that we have a responsibility, if I know that the essence of my religion, if I'm with deep roots in my faith, I have no problem having a conversation. Now, it's never going to be a conversation where I'm going to be impacted. And that's the Messianic era, when we will be well-rooted in our faith. When we're going to be extremely comfortable with who we are, and we're going to have positive vibes sent out from Jerusalem. Ki metzion tetzet Torah, Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim. The Beiti Bet Tefillah Yikara, my house in Jerusalem is a house of prayer for all nations. We believe in interacting with the world. We believe that at the right time, that is our responsibility. We are supposed to be a nation of priests. At the right time. At the wrong time, boy, are we asking for trouble. At the wrong time, like translating the Torah to Greek, at the wrong time, when we are doing things on their terms, that could be very, very harmful. So you have to understand the idea of Sukkot is relating to the world, right? Presenting our religion to the world. Presenting it as is with confidence. That's what Sukkot is about. Rav Hirsch used to say that the numbers declining, right, on day 113, on day 212, is because, not that we want the nations to decline, we want them to unite. And symbolically, when you are declining, the goal is not the decline to 0, but the decline to 1. That the differences that we find among the nations, right, the wars that exist, that Pakistan's not getting along with India, and that Taiwan's having an issue with China, all those boundaries, when the world will understand our values and understand the purpose of creation, they will no longer exist, right? Humanity will feel this common, this connection. The workers of the world will unite, not just the workers, right? All people of the world will unite when there's an agenda, when there's a desire. I mentioned the workers when Golda Meir, right, made one of her visits to Europe, and she was meeting socialist leaders of other countries. And she was like shocked that, why aren't you supporting Israel? I mean, we're socialists, right? You're socialist. Isn't that common philosophy stronger than your hatred towards us? She really did not understand it. She did not fully understand it. Now, we are believers that yes, there are values that can unite humanity. There's no question about it. That's the Messianic era. And Yaakov felt he is there. He is there. He is in that era, and he settles with the Sukkot tradition. And where does he go? Vayavo Yaakov. Now where does he come? What city does he reach with shlemut? Verse 18. Vayavo Yaakov shalem. He comes with shlemut, peace, shalom. The peace is not just internal peace, this is peace with the world. He senses that mission accomplished, we are here. And what is the city that brings about peace? Shechem. Why Shechem? Now, years later, when our ancestors entered the land of Israel, they of Yehoshua, what was their first stop? Their first stop was near Shechem. Why Shechem unites us as a nation? The pact, the concept of arvut, that we are all responsible for one another. The place that unites the people of Israel is actually Shechem. Shechem has that potential. And Yaakov sensed it. And he was on target because in the days of Yehoshua, we united as a nation. As we entered into our land, God said the first stop is Shechem, because that's where you turn into a nation. And Yaakov felt that here we are, it's Shechem time, it's unity time. It is the place of shalom, of shalem, shlemut, completion, and shalom of peace. That's what he thought. And it was time to take root, it was time to purchase the land, and he buys it. And we are even told the currency he used. Okay, you're tuning into what's taking place here? Verse 19, he purchases some land there, he bought a parcel of land, and he pitches his tent for his children. Wonderful. And how much does he pay? Because you really need to know how much he paid, right? It's very, very important. 400 kasita. Vos meint kasita. It's a currency, right? So the commentators know it's ma'ah. But if the word kasita is noted, there must be a meaning there. There must be a meaning there. So the word kasita, okay, this is in the test, so you need to know this, okay? What are the core letters in the kasita? The kuf, shin, tet. Keshet with the top. In other words, it's close call, but there are two words in Tanakh. Two words in Tanakh that mean keshet, keset, kuf, shin, or sin, and tet. Number one, we have when we take out the Sefer Torah, we say a prayer called the Baruch Shmei. So we run through that, right? It's an Aramaic. It's a later prayer, meaning if you pick up a prayer book from the 14th century, you're not going to see it. It's a prayer that made it in a bit later, and therefore 99% of communities say it. Baruch Shmei. Right? Oh, no, we all know that, okay? So there we say some beautiful words there. Lo al enash rachitzna, we don't rely on people. Really, don't rely on people. The lo al bar elahin samichna, we don't trust even people of power. Ella, you want to know who we Jews trust? Be'elaha dishmaya, God of heaven. Trust him. He's been around, he's trustworthy, he's a being of truth. Who? He is a God of kishot. He's a God of truth. He's Mr. Truth. God's the God of truth. Kishot. Kuf, shin, tet, truth. That's explanation number one. Explanation number two. How to put on makeup or to beautify yourself. I have makeup for on. When the camera started rolling, you wanted me to put on makeup. So I think even in modern Hebrew they say lehit kashet. There's a rabbinic term that if you want to be critical of others, you first have to keep an eye on yourself. Before you want others to beautify their behavior, you beautify yourself. Sounds like Mayor Ford, right? That
It's the opposite of truth, though, to put on makeup.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Makeup. So it says kishot atzmecha.
Hides the truth.
V'achar kach kshot achari. So ask Reb Josh. Wait a second. It's makeup is kulo sheker. Esti, what's her name? Estee Lauder or who else? What are the big names? Revlon.
Max Factor. Max Factor, he's my favorite.
Max.
What is this? Botox? Anyway, so makeup is a big bluff. Right? Makeup is the biggest bluff, right? In these tabloids, for them, a chashuv, a picture is a famous, beautiful actress without makeup. In other words, Nebach, look how... So you ask the question, how can the word of truth also be the word of makeup? So the truth is that there's going... you have to make it up. There's going to be a time that what we present to the world will be the truth. What is really makeup? The way you present yourself to society. When we are supposed to conceal our identity, that which we present is not always going to be the truth. In other words, what I would teach to people of Israel, to Jews, is not always going to be what I teach to Gentiles. I've addressed in a few synagogues, here too once, a few years ago, that there was a group of Christians that wanted to know more about Judaism. I even led a tour at age 9. I don't know if I ever told you this story.
What's age 9?
And when I was 9 years old, we were spending a few days in Kibbutz Lavi, in northern Israel, and my mother's checking out of the hotel. We were leaving that morning, and a bus of these Catholics from Spain stopped by, and they asked the front desk, we would like a tour of the kibbutz and of maybe the synagogue. Is there anyone on your staff that speaks Spanish?
Oh, there you go.
And they rolled their eyes, say, we're sorry. And my mother, of course, says, well, I have a son who speaks Spanish, and he's more than happy. So I led a tour. I led a tour at age 9, and I take them to the synagogue, and I show them. They were the nicest people snapping pictures, and then they start asking me questions. Do you collect coins, right? Do you like the World Cup? So I said, yeah, they took my address, and for years, my coin collection was full of coins from Spain. And Baruch Hashem loves me. In 1982, the World Cup was in Spain. And my brothers were so jealous because I had towels and flyers and banners, everything. So I was leading a tour. Now, that's the history. And I kept up with Pilar Escudero Lozoya for many, many years. I don't know what's recently, but we kept up from Bilbao. You been to Bilbao? Bilbao, and not far from Barcelona. Not yet. Okay. Bilbao.
We're in Spain.
You say Bilbao.
Bilboa.
With that, the way you present things to the world is not going to be the way you present it to your people. But in the Messianic era, it's going to be very, very different. The way it's presented could be the truth. The way it's presented is the emet. The makeup is going to be the truth in the Messianic era. The kishot could be makeup, could be the external, but it's also the truth. The truth becomes the external. And that is, again, it symbolizes the fact that the Messianic era has arrived. We could send out the Jewish people, the Jewish educators, and let them reach out and have a positive effect on the world. Wonderful. So the next portion, we'd expect that chapter 34 is a chapter of one of the Jews going out, interacting with the world and having a positive effect on the world. Didn't work. What happens? The next chapter, Dina goes out, Vatetzeh Dina, and we get very excited. She's going out. She's changing the world, Messianic era, what the Jews are supposed to be. But unfortunately, it wasn't the right time. And a tragedy, a serious tragedy for Dina, tragedy for Yaakov, tragedy for us. It just shows that we weren't ready yet. And Yaakov realizes we're not there yet. We don't have that leader. We're not in the Messianic era. We're not there. Now, Dina had the potential. It's interesting to note that there's a midrash that when Leah became pregnant with Dina, she prays to the Almighty and says, I want this to be a female because I know that we're supposed to have 12 males. If I have another one, my sister Rachel will only have one male. So she prays that this child should be a female. So Dina could have been or should have been, there are all kind of interesting rabbinic traditions, should have been Yosef. So she had within her a little bit of that Yosef, the ability to interact with the world. As we know very well, Yosef par excellence, that's what he deals with. He's in Egypt, he remains a righteous person, and he really changes the world. He saves Egypt. He takes that message. Dina had it within her, but unfortunately, we fail here. So Yaakov remains a believer that Shechem is still going to offer peace. Shechem is going to be that place that at some point in the future, there's going to be someone within my family that's going to unite. The leader will come, and there will be shalom and peace. And now we can turn to this week's parsha and read why he sent Yosef up to his brothers. So if you turn back to page 202, where Vayilchu echav lirot et tzon aviyem b'Shechem. The brothers are there at Shechem, and Yisrael, the name given for the high level, for the future of the people of Israel, a much higher level than Yaakov. He turns to Yosef and he says, go ahead and see the Shlom Achicha, Shlom Atzon. It's a place of peace. He had a sense. He felt again that Shechem will bring about the unity. Yes, there were problems and he was aware of it. But he believed that there's going to be unity that will come about in Shechem. Yosef is known as the antidote against the Amalek or Esav force. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look back in Parshas Vayeishev, Yaakov Avinu is working. Hard work, hard labor. And then the Torah tells us that as Yosef was born, Yaakov turns to Lavan and says, okay, I need to go now. What was it about the birth of Yosef that Yaakov felt, now is the time to make my way back to the land of Israel? Ask the rabbis. The rabbis know that he sensed that Yosef has the ability to fight the powers, the spiritual powers of Esav and Amalek. Amalek was a grandson, but Amalek symbolizes the hatred to the Jewish people that's deeper than any force in the world. Amalek is a symbol of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism, not just as a being, but as a message. Amalek is a message that's anti-Jewish. You know what Amalek symbolizes? Amalek symbolizes a force that believes in a world without God, believes in Greek philosophy, believes that beauty is everything. Beauty is everything, that there's no higher being. Let's worship this world that we live in. That's the forces that are very anti-Jewish. Yosef feels Yaakov could fight it. And you know why? There are different types of Jews. Good Jews I'm talking about. Jews that study, Jews that meditate, Jews that perform mitzvos. There are those that are locked up or lock themselves up in institutions and study day and night, pray day and night, and take care of their families. Now, we need them. Because if we're not going to have them, we're not going to be in existence 200 years from now. but they're not having a major impact on society or the world around us now. You know who is, yes, having an impact on the world around us? People who study, who pray, but they interact with the world. They go out to the workplace, but they have values. They believe that you have to be kind, that you have to return lost objects, even if it's $98,000. They believe that you have to go ahead and make your contribution to society, and especially if it's a Jewish state. Those are the people that are having an impact. If you interact with the world with faith, you're having much more of an impact than just having faith. I always quote this rabbi that I knew from Memphis, who was he was a Torah Metzion, meaning he lived in Israel, spent 2 years in Memphis, and he talks about when he was going into Gaza in the battle a few years ago, and the courage that he was able to give to other soldiers that came from secular backgrounds, due to the fact that he was a man of faith, but he was still fighting with them. How they were begging him for a tehillim, for a yarmulke, tefillin. In other words, here was a person that has faith, but he interacts. He is doing what everyone else is doing, but he is elevating the world. Those are the people that are having an impact, and they are the ones that can fight Amalek. You can fight negative forces in the world by interacting with the world. People that could go ahead and study in universities and get PhDs even in the humanities, right? And they could be very familiar with all the works of philosophy, from Spinoza to Sartre to Heidegger, but they still retain faith. They are the ones that can have an impact on the world if they are really strong in their belief. They are the ones that can have an impact. That is Yosef. That is Yosef. And that, by the way, is also Hanukkah. Hanukkah, we are fighting Greek culture. Fighting Greek culture? What is Greek culture? Beauty. So how do we fight Greek culture? You take a menorah, go home. What was that?
With keshet.
With keshet, okay? With the beauty, no question about that. We present the truth to the world. Any of you have nice silver menorahs? No need, you have some silver menorahs. They're beautiful, right? Go now. There's sale. Go drive down Bathurst. You'll see there's sales for menorahs. Menorahs are beautiful. The way we fight Greek culture is not by claiming, you know what, we're going to fight you by doing the opposite. That we're going to go ahead and publicize the miracle with the ugliest menorahs. That there is a mitzvah, there could have been theoretically a chapter in Shulchan Aruch that tells us that all menorahs have to be made of earthenware. Why? Because we must fight the culture that believes in beauty and worships beauty by having an ugly menorah. And there would be legends of rabbis who made menorahs out of manure just to enhance the mitzvah of having something as ugly as possible. You don't buy. Ugly as possible, that's how you fight Greek culture. We don't do that. There are no such things. The opposite is the truth. That it's considered ideal to have a silver menorah. Gold not, that was in the temple, a silver menorah. Right? It is considered ideal to have one that is impressive. You place it in a public place where people see something magnificent. You fight the culture. How do you fight the culture? How do you have an impact on the world? By taking what they believe in, but showing them, you know what, we'll do the same, but for the sake of heaven. We're going to value beauty, but we believe that beauty is there to relate to God, to be inspired that there's a God, to live a life based on the values of God. That's what we do. It is a time, so Hanukkah very much so, and it's interesting when I meet non-Jews, they all are sure that Hanukkah is the biggest of the holidays. Right? They have no doubt. Is there any U.S. stamp, right, in the United States, a stamp with a Yom Kippur image on it, or a Rosh Hashanah image on it? There's a U.S. stamp, I don't know about Canada, if there's a Chanukiah. Is there a menorah on Canadian? No expert here is that. The United States does have a stamp, right, Jewish vote, they need it. So there's a stamp for Hanukkah. Hanukkah is really the holiday when we reach out to the world, we show it to the world. Right? We present it to the world. And the way we present it to the world is being familiar with what they consider beautiful and use it for the sake of the world. So Hanukkah, again, has that ability. We will change the world by interacting with them, by valuing them. It's a messianic holiday as well, by the way. It's the idea that light, that even in darkness there is light. Eventually the light will spread. So there's a very strong relationship between Hanukkah and Succos. Succos is concerned for the world. The world will celebrate Succos. Hanukkah is a little bit of the Succos in exile, where we relate to the world, we talk about it to the world, we publicize it. The idea of Pirsum Hanes, we publicize the miracle. The ideal location for the menorah is where people driving down should see it and see the beauty of our faith, the beauty of our religion. So there's a relationship between Succos and Hanukkah. So if we started the class by asking, why Shammai is of the opinion that on day 1 you light 8 candles, and on day 2, 7, and we mentioned the fact that it relates to the decline of the bulls offered on Sukkos, and we wondered what relationship is there between Sukkos and Hanukkah, the answer is both of them very much so show our concern for the world. We are a faith. We do not believe that all those who are around us are infidels. We are believers that every single human being was created in the image of God. We have a unique mission to fulfill in the Messianic era. A little bit is being fulfilled now as well. We have to preserve ourselves because God forbid to only focus on the future and not fulfill our responsibility now of preserving Jewish identity. But nevertheless, the people that reach out and have a positive impact on the world, the sanctification of God's name, people who go ahead and have the title rabbi and do wonderful things and have positive impact on the world, they are fulfilling our mission of the future and the present. The Sukkos mission of the future is the Hanukkah mission of today. And therefore it's very logical for Shammai to go ahead and learn the candle order from Sukkos. Still stick to Hillel. In other words, I don't want people walking away saying, Rabbi said we should follow Shammai. But even if we do not follow him, nevertheless, I think there's a message we could learn from his view. Thank you very much for coming, and everyone have a good day. We'll see you next week.